For anyone that's tried to take a game even somewhat competitively, chances are the things we focused on while learning the game actually hold us back from reaching higher levels long term. In pretty much any game where our goal is to be another human, even though, it's like lagging all the time and the balance is terrible. I mean, who's balancing this game? Why did they nerf my character when that other guy is? Every game has its own unique mechanics, a variety of characters that can usually do cool combos and setups, and generally just have things that are so satisfying to practice and pull off against another person. Even though a lot of competitive games don't play too similarly to one another, there's usually one major issue that people tend to have in common when trying to get better at any of them, and chances are, if you want to get really good at a game, the things you originally focused on learning might be holding you back down the road. Of course, we want to master the cool stuff our character can do. Mastering the mechanics is very satisfying. Doing a stylish combo is fun, and honestly, just hitting another player with something cool is one of the main reasons we play any of these games. If you want to get good at Street Fighter, Smash, or anything competitive, and you search up some resources on YouTube, you will more likely than not see an insane amount of combo videos and tutorials and highlights. In many fighting games themselves, you will see modes that help you learn the combos. There's so much focusing on learning and mastering these kinds of things, but as you could probably guess, these are nowhere near the most important aspect of reaching higher levels of play, and focusing too much on pulling this stuff off is actually the opposite approach that most top players think about. I don't want to sound like a cheeseball and quote The Art of War, but I guess I will. In the quote, "He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight," far too many people at mid-levels are focused on the first half of this quote when getting into a game. They learn their best combos, their confirms, their mix-ups, and whatnot, and they focus on finding a way to hit them when they actually start fighting against other people. The second part of this quote, however, is what every great player not only understands, but builds their entire strategy out of. The cool stuff we want to do is not as important as realizing that our opponent wants to do those things to us too, especially at the mid-high levels. In any game you try to climb rank, you will notice that people are almost like gatekeeping you by just doing these things that are difficult to deal with, and they don't even care what you're thinking about. But you almost never see that kind of playstyle at the actual top levels. At the very top levels, almost every competitive game comes down to squeezing the most reward out of the smallest amounts of risk. This isn't even just a fighting game exclusive thing. Some of the best League of Legends players are known for their CSing, which has absolutely nothing to do with killing another person. I mean, it can, but very loosely. It applies to a lot of games. As you can probably guess, throwing yourself at your opponent and just auto-patting the stuff that you've practiced is the best way to make sure you stop improving without even realizing why you're not getting better. Although this seems like such a simple concept, even at some of the higher levels, this is something that a lot of players just put on the back burner of their mind. Like I showed you, that player in Elite Smash or Masters in Street Fighter who's kind of not even caring what you do, and they're just doing this autopilot thing that's very hard to deal with. But if I show you the very top level play at any game, more often than not, the best players and their playstyles are said to be methodical, they're patient, they don't overextend. They've mastered the low risk options. So many fighting games are often highlighted by their cool combos and the tech you can do, but what are the best players actually doing when you watch them? If you watch a game like Street Fighter, you might notice that they're just walking back and forth in a lot of the match. Sometimes in Melee, a very aggressive game, you'll notice people just dashing, waiting for a better opening, taking to the air while retreating, or they're only approaching behind something safe. And even in a game like Ultimate, some people will literally try not to interact with you so they can get a leg up first. In any game where you're fighting another person, it's obviously very natural to want to hit them, especially with the stuff that you've practiced. A lot of people do not want to hear this, but chances are that in any game you play, shifting your mindset and strategy from trying to hit your opponent to trying to make sure your opponent never has the opportunity to hit you will likely increase your consistency and ability to climb the ranks of these games. Again, this sounds so simple, but if you watch the very last VOD of yourself in any game you play, I promise you will find a point in the game where you threw caution to the wind and you just did something because you felt like it. Maybe you weren't even thinking, you literally just did it and you can't even remember why. You just had the itch to try to hit your opponent right now, even though chances are you could have just found a better opening soon by doing less. Just go back and watch any game you've played, or even play a game after listening to this exact video, and I promise you it's hard to fix on the spot. You will just probably sometimes press forward and try to hit your opponent with something because it just felt like the right thing to do. Maybe you jump in on your opponent in Street Fighter even though your opponent wasn't really scared of anything else and they just anti-air you for free. Or maybe you're playing Smash and you just had to do that dash attack. You swear it was gonna hit, but then you got shielded and you died for it. Or maybe you just threw out a full-on smash attack because you just really had to get that last stock. You swear it was gonna hit. Someone asks you, bro, why'd you whiff that? You're gonna say, dude, I swear he was gonna dash in on me there. But really, your primal instincts just kicked in and you looked for an excuse afterwards. I personally believe this is why characters like Zangief and even Honda in Street Fighter tend to have such great win rates online, even when they're not typically considered that strong. Zangief is considered strong right now, but even when he wasn't, his win rates looked pretty good in Masters Plus. This is a character that essentially forces you to throw every dream you had of hitting him with the cool stuff you've labbed and kind of forcing your own game plan on him, and instead you now have to focus exactly on what he wants to do and making sure he can't do that. Now, his movement is limited and he often has a decent amount of recovery on some of his bigger normals, so it should be a struggle for him to get in and do what he wants to do, but you have to make his job a living hell or he will just run you over. A lot of people struggle to adjust to this because obviously they're more used to their own game plans of doing what they've done against other characters. But in matchups like this, you really do have to focus on making sure he never gets close to you or can hit you, and you kind of take what you can along the way. Smash actually has a lot of characters like this. Some characters require you to specifically stop them from playing their own game or stop swinging into them and just doing things that are unintuitive to the way you usually play the game. And not surprisingly, a lot of people find these matchups incredibly difficult to play. Someone like Snake, who will punish you for just swinging at him for no reason by just holding a grenade. And Snake's obviously a good character, but even some worse characters who have very polarizing playstyles like Little Mac, people struggle to fight him even though he's one of the worst characters in the game. And that is because Little Mac has very strong moves, but you should know exactly what he wants to go for and where his weak points are. So rather than playing your own game, you should focus on exploiting his weaknesses and not letting him hit you. That being said, it's actually quite hard to get better at controlling yourself in high pressure games. In so many gaming communities, people will just meme about winning a matchup or something and they'll give the advice, bro, just don't get hit. It sounds kind of funny, but it shows that people know the important goals in the game. If not the most important goal is to not get hit, but very few people are actually able to keep this at the forefront of their mind while in game. And because of the way we learn these games, it's very natural that the first thing we want to do and the first things we think about are how are we going to hit our opponent? And we try to do that. We practiced our combos and our setups, so let's go in and do them, right? Obviously, to actually make an impact in any of these games, you're going to have to do damage to your opponent. So I'm not trying to tell you that you shouldn't try to hit your opponent. All I'm saying is that you should shift your perspective to prioritizing your safety first and hitting the opponent second. This is a shift that you'll almost have to make if you want to improve, but it's harder than it sounds in many games. Maybe your complete playstyle doesn't need to shift to this, but there will definitely be matchups that force you to think this way. Honestly, I've seen for myself how big of a change this can make. When I was coaching someone back during the lockdowns in Ultimate, I noticed this person had a very good neutral, but he would very often overextend to hit me. I would be very high up and he would burn his double jump to try to kill me off the top. Or I'd be off stage and he would go very deep to try to get me, and I would often reversal him or just find my way back to stage for free. For anyone who doesn't know, Smash is obviously a game where you try to take each other's stocks, but it's also a game that you could think about just being combative king of the hill. The person who controls the center of the stage is more often than not in a better position, because being further from the center of the stage means you're closer to blast zones, means you have less space to walk back, and it's just a terrible position to be in. Obviously, some matchups and characters prefer different parts of the screen, but as a general rule, it is one of the fundamentals that players will have to learn and play around. As a kind of overcorrection, I told this player not to focus on taking my stocks, but instead to make sure I could never touch the middle of this stage in Pokemon Stadium 2, where you see the Pokeball in the middle. They didn't necessarily have to sit in it themselves, but they had to make sure I didn't reach it. This small change of perspective made sure that they weren't overextending too much, especially when they're already in advantageous positions, because sometimes they would get reversal too much, or I would get back to stage for free, when if they just took their time and controlled that center, I would have had such a hard time fighting them because I was in a worse position. Whether or not they got to stock or not right away was less important than making sure I never got to play the game and reset. This player did come back to me weeks later telling me their online tournament results have been getting so much better, and they were surprised at how many people just kind of swing at you trying to get back to the center of stage. And I told them it's natural. Even people who do not consider stage control as like a vital fundamental that they've played around will inherently try to find their way back to the center. It's scary being close to the blast zones in these games. So some people will do autopilot positions or kind of swing recklessly on their way to get back to a more advantageous position, and you can kind of snowball your games from there without ever taking too many risks. This concept was actually drilled into my own brain when I was first learning Overwatch. I watched this video and I highly recommend you check it out, but the idea really is as simple as shifting your priorities in a game from I must hit them to I will never take damage that I don't need to take. A Genji player in Overwatch will never just shift into the first squishy target he sees. He'll look for a flank and try to make sure he has a way out before he even goes in. A lot of other people who are still learning the game might learn their cool combo and they just want to kill the first person they think they can. There have been so many times, whether in Street Fighter League or people's streams, where people talk about the #1 rule to think about when you fight Punk in Street Fighter is don't whiff buttons in front of him. This guy is so good at running you over if you press a single button that did not reach him. That is the prevailing thought that people have in their minds when they fight him. It isn't that some of his offensive pressure is so scary that they need to work on their defense or something. It's not that he will rush them down in neutral so they need to stay ready and react to too many different things. Nope, it's just to remind themselves not to overextend a single limb or they might lose the game off it. It doesn't matter which competitive game I show you, even some of the most offensive-oriented games come down to which player has better defense and better patience and doesn't swing too recklessly. As I mentioned, we're taught very early into these games about the cool combos we can do and the moves that we have. So our initial game plans are usually set around landing these things on other people. But long term, think about how consistent can you be if the forefront of your strategy is just trying to hit your opponent. Just like in real life, if you were to start boxing and you're protecting your face with your hands, if you go throw out a huge punch at someone, well, now your face is exposed for a much longer period of time than it probably should be. If that punch does not have a crazy high success rate of landing, a good fighter will win the entire fight of you making that decision to just throw out a punch. But yeah, enough of the analogies. I'm sure you get the point. I hope you learned something from this video, even though chances are you already knew the importance of defense and safety and the fundamentals. Hopefully you got to see some of these examples and maybe think back on your own games where you were not prioritizing the right strategies and goals while you were in the game yourself. Everyone wants to do their cool stuff and everyone wants to hit their opponent. That is fine, that is fun. But I promise you that you will be more successful if you save these cool moments for after you've already found your opening, rather than trying to force anything that does not need to be forced yet. If you learned something from this video, I would really appreciate if you liked the video, shared it with someone else who may need to hear this. If your friend sent this to you, it means you're swinging too much in neutral, right? Calm down, think a little bit. But yeah, likes and comments do mean a whole lot when it comes to YouTube sharing the video to others, so I'd greatly appreciate any help. If you want to support me, consider being a member on the channel. And just thanks for watching, and let me know if there are any other subjects you'd like me to tackle. Stay beautiful, my friends.